Welcome to Up
Review,
the darkest and grittiest furry review podcast
on the web. All right, so introducing the interviewee.
It was 2013, and I thought, many ages ago, you know what needs to be created? Furry noir.
Who are you? How do you have any idea of what this is?
You said dark and grittiest, so I was here, right? That's what you called it?
So, last time the three of us got together, we went over Inhuman Acts, edited by Ocean Tigrox. And this time, we actually had the pleasure of having the lead editor with us here today.
Rawr! That's me. I'm Ocean Tigrox.
Are you? Really?
Yes.
Actually, I thought, if I remember right, I thought you were Night Eyes at first.
Who?
When I met you at RAR, and I did not know.
Actually,
I didn't know
I was
anyone
Night
until I
Eyes?
drove it.
You didn't tell Night Eyes, did you?
I mean, I'm going to get yelled at because he's going to hear this probably anyway, so.
We could take a gamble and think maybe he won't. Sorry, Night Eyes. Love you. You're a great guy. I can't wait to hang out next time.
Right?
The one kind of slightly surreal thing about RAR was talking and people were like, oh, I know you. And you're like, how do you know me? I'm like, I recognize your voice. And you're like, oh, I guess that's a thing.
No, that was me. Right. I heard your voice. Oh, wait, you're Ocean. It was Night Eyes. I had no idea who they were. I don't think I've ever met them before the time.
Poor Night Eye.
That was my first time meeting all you people, so.
Well, who are you calling you people?
So, you're Ocean, RAR, yes.
Hello, guys. How's it going?
Don't we all?
I've never been on someone else's podcast, so this is new to me.
No, you have been on someone else's podcast.
Well, I've technically been on, what is it, Teeth and Tight Faces?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, but it was also Shit Writers Say, which is still kind of my podcast.
Yeah.
If there's one thing that I think I've had a small impact on the furry writing community, is that Shit Writers Stay has now continued on into other podcasts.
We actually did it on behalf of Independent Clause at Furthermore, so that I'm actually really looking forward to that going live.
Nice.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun with that.
Not the actual first time that a Shit Writers Say has been done at Furthermore.
But it is the first time it was done without Sparf. And you.
I look forward to hearing what you guys rambled about.
We had the old queen, the old bitter queen, the young bitter queen, and the real queen. So it was fantastic.
Oh, God. Oh.
And there's our intro.
This is the one out of everything else we've said so far.
I don't know. That's my favorite thing so far, but then again...
Jeez, you guys are reminding me I still have a podcast to edit.
So we should probably ask our interviewee some questions or something.
So I heard you guys read a book.
We did read a book.
Oh,
Not yet.
We have read one,
Yep.
and I think some people are halfway or bits of ways through another, so...
You guys all did read Inhuman Acts, though?
Yes,
cool.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we are not doing this blind.
How did you enjoy it? Or did you enjoy it, I guess is the first question.
Could have been better.
Everything could be better.
So my first anthology was Roar Volume 7. That was my first furry anthology I've read. And when I remember reading that, and it felt like I can go from story to story, and I just had to get used to this new author's style. With Inhuman Acts, as Jay so lovingly put it, because there's the that's fucked up scale, I almost needed to pause after reading each story for me personally so I can take in what I just read because, ow, why? Exactly.
As I was doing the slush pile for this, I was along with rating the stories how good I thought they were. There was also a darkness meter, so that later when I arranged them into the book, I tried to make them like some lighter and darker and just kind of go back and forth.
I almost want to ask what number mine fell on for Inhuman Acts 2.
I haven't made that scale yet for number 2.
So why don't we start off with the obvious question of why noir?
Why noir? Oh, I just love noir, and it's one of my favorite genres. And if you've seen a lot of my writing, you'll notice that generally I either accidentally write noir or accidentally write dystopian or accidentally write both. And it's just As in the intro, like if you look at the dedication in the book too, I said like, my dad's a police officer, so I've always been used to crime stories and seen things from a police perspective. And my mom has always been big into mysteries, and that kind of fell onto me. And it's really, to me, a little bit of a merge of both. And I've always enjoyed these dark, gritty stories. I love stories that have a great twist. I love to be surprised. I love it when you read a story and that twist is so jaw-dropping that you're like, holy crap. Like, that's just mind-boggling because it's outside the frame of a normal person, right? I love seeing how noir twists and turns characters in directions that are just so crazy, and seeing them play out.
And of course, my mind immediately jumps to T.S. McNally's Vermin's Vice.
I love that story. But then again, of course I did. That's why I put it in there. How about this? I also wanted to ask you guys questions in this. And when I put this book together, I had my goals for what I wanted to accomplish to people reading it, right? Because a lot of people, when they hear that, they're like, what's noir? I've kind of heard noir. And it can be a very polarizing thing to some people because they're like, I know what noir is, and it's just not my jam. And that's fine. Everyone's got their taste. So I want to know, what does noir mean to you guys? And if so, did your view change after reading this book?
Oh, we covered that in the review, so you can just listen to that.
Great.
No, be a good host.
Okay, so we'll pause this recording, and I'll talk to you guys next week. I'm listening to it on my road trip up for Easter to the family.
So for me personally, noir was mostly a parody. For me, when I first got to noir, one of the reasons I actually wanted to read Inhuman Acts, I'll own, I was cheating. I was reading Inhuman Acts because I had a story idea, because I kind of heard that there was going to be an Inhuman Acts 2 a while ago, because I kind of did this, writing retreat with the editor. So I already had loose ideas of what I wanted to do, but I didn't quite know what noir was. All of my exposure to it were parodies. My idea of noir was honestly the gritty detective stories. And this really opened my eyes to it can be that. Doesn't mean it is that.
Mm. Yeah, there were definitely a large chunk of detective stories for that slush pile.
It was half, wasn't it?
Oh, it was more than half.
I mean that actually got published in Inhuman Acts. It was half of them were like the private eye type
definitely.
trope.
I tried my best to space them out so that it wasn't just private eye after private eye after private eye. Like, it fits very well, and like those are always great stories, but with an anthology, you generally want a little more variety, right? So
yeah, technically 8 of them of the 13 are detective or PI stories. Just because I happen to count them offhand. Just because,
if I recall, the one thing that every story has in common is someone dies.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah,
depends on your definition of death for one of them.
But technically, someone does die, quote unquote, in that.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, 2 people. 1 at least. No, 2.
No spoilers.
2. I'm not giving spoilers. I'm just saying numbers. At least 1, possibly 4. 1. We can skip this because I'm going to actually go through and actually stop to think about it, and that's going to be
just trust me. Trust me.
Oh, trust me, I do. If I didn't trust you, I wouldn't send you stories to edit anyways, or critique.
Excellent. What about the other 2?
For me, I didn't really have preconceived notions. I had actually been struggling with what noir was because I had heard, like, for example, the Fangs and Fonts episode on noir, and kind of had left that with a feeling of, okay, I still don't get it. So for me, this kind of felt like almost a guidebook of what noir was and what kind of elements it could contain.
As for me, what I thought noir was more influenced by like the film noir and such. So seeing different takes on it, like the sci-fi setting and things like that were in your anthology, was a really refreshing take on it for me, because I'd always had the grizzled anti-hero type with the femme fatale and all that. And I think that is very important for noir. But the way some of the authors in Inhuman Acts took that and just kind of turned it on its head was really, really fun.
Yeah, I think one thing I really liked about like almost all the stories is that I can look at them and go, here's one of my favorite tropes in noir. And the story just kind of breaks it down and tells it. Like, again, if you go back to Vermin Vice, that one is, it's the good guy just trying to do what's right as everything slowly pulls him down further and further until he just finally snaps. You know, like the closest thing in mainstream that I can think of is if you watch Dark Knight and you watch the fall of Harvey Dent, right? He was this good guy trying to do everything he could, and then in the end, he's just broken.
I'm also trying not to say much because you just mentioned my favorite story, and I don't want spoilers because I love that story.
I hope that's not a spoiler, but it kind of can.
Not really.
If you want, we can
high
do another
level.
take.
It was very. No, I think it's high level enough, and besides, you don't quite know how. That's messed up.
Mhm.
Trying to censor myself because we're trying to be family friendly.
So one thing I did want to mention, the very first story really set the tone for what noir
Mm.
is.
Like a good anthology show.
Yes.
Yes.
Yanis wrote me a fantastic story.
Oh, yes, for sure. And that got me thinking, how did you come about actually ordering these stories in your anthology?
So, speaking of Yanis' story, I just want to tell one story about that story, and she can probably hear me from here. But when we were flying back from AC last year, Kiri was reading the book, and we're sitting on the plane getting back. And I look at the book, and she's getting to the end of Yanis' story. And I can see where she is in the page, and I just look at her face, and I'm just waiting for it, and then her jaw just literally drops. Her eyes just go wide. She's just like, and I'm like, and I just kind of lean over and go, that's why he's the first story in the book. I couldn't have asked for like a better, it was just, mwah. But sorry, getting back to your question, how did I arrange these? So again, if I go back and talk about that dark meter, how I wanted, like, it's a very dark story. I generally tried to mirror it with something next to it that was not as dark. And then again, what we were talking about with, there's so many stories about PIs that I then tried to sparse them out as much as possible. So that just trying to make sure there wasn't a PI story right next to each other one, a detective one, was already a bit of a challenge. And then that's the other thing that I did was, so I put Yanis's at the beginning because I'm like you said, this to me is like your traditional noir story. It's going to set the theme. It's going to set the tone. It's really going to just hammer those beats of what you're about to expect for the rest of the anthology. Grey Flank on the other end, another what I felt was just a classic noir story. And his is a bit longer, so I was happy putting it at the end I felt it was a good longer piece that ends the anthology on that, again, kind of bedposting the anthology, right? These two classic noir stories to set it and end it with. And then I really, really liked Huskyteer's story. And I felt that, like the publisher thought it was so great that they clearly got they got Severin to do a reading of it. So I put that one in the middle because I just kind of wanted this three. I love all the stories, but those to me were probably the three best ones. Maybe hard to say, but those three really set the tone of what I wanted and just showed these good noir stories. So I set them up beginning, middle, and end, and then kind of built the rest around them.
Okay, yeah, Huskyteer's story was quite good.
Mm-hmm.
I stop that. Yes, Huskyteer was rather pleased to point out that she was story number 007.
Yes. That, I think I had a choice of which one in the middle, and I just kind of like nudged it over there as well, just for her.
Of course.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Say no more.
Yeah, the funny thing is the one question I had off the cuff you just answered, which was, can you tell us your favorite child? But you basically
My favorite child of the book. Well, like. They're all good. Like I talk about how I put them like these three putting in those positions. That doesn't necessarily mean they're my favorite, but they're like, like when I read Yanis's story, I'm like, yes, this is in my book right now, right? When I read it in the slush pile, like when you're a slush pile reader or an editor and you read a story like that and you're just like, it's in, right? Those are the ones that just make you feel great about your slush pile.
Make notes now real quick. Okay. Look for that story. Got it.
But yeah, at the same time, I don't want to like shadow the other stories. Like I could go through each one and just tell you what I love about each one of them and why they're in there, because like Fixer was just great. There's River City Knights is just your average Joe. Ghost, I feel bad for Solus Lupus, because Ghost, I actually really like Ghost, and for some reason I keep forgetting it's in here. I'm so sorry, Solus. Your story is like, and like as I'll mention, I'm like, I wanted Cyberpunk, and I'm like, shoot, that is actually a bit of Cyberpunk in there. Why do I keep forgetting it's in there? I feel bad. Yeah, I don't want to pick a favorite, because really they're all, if they weren't great, I wouldn't put them in the book. I don't know. What else do you guys want?
No, that's good. Thanks.
No. There's no more questions on JD's list that I have not asked yet.
Yeah, I still have a couple more questions.
And also, I'm just kind of picking off them as well. So we're basically going back and forth.
Well, I guess we did one of them, which was, what stories did you find particularly memorable?
Memorable? Yeah, like again, Yanis's twist there, I think, is one of the highlights of the whole anthology. Vermin's Vice really sticks out to me. Again, we had to work a little bit to just get that twist just right. To me, it's just right. I had some other people that maybe disagreed, and it was a story that I had to fight for to get in there, but I'm really glad how it turned out. I just look at these stories and I want to say editing stories, but I probably shouldn't.
All right, so I'll jump in here with a little interlude. The cover, Saylin's cover for Inhuman Acts is amazing.
Oh, yeah. She did fantastic.
Was there anything in particular that drew you to Saylin for the cover, or was it? So
Saylin's a friend of mine. She's a local. She does fantastic, phenomenal art, as you can see. When I was first looking, just thinking about covers, Saylin made this poster that I think, when she was the guest of honor at Vancouver, I want to say. Maybe I'm wrong. But I think when it was Vancouver, she made kind of a poster she could sell when she was doing her booth. And she ended up making an Indiana Bones parody of Indiana Jones. And I can look this poster up for you guys if you want to see it later. But she did kind of like an Indiana Jones, but played up in furry. And it looked fantastic. And I basically went to people and went, this is what the cover of Pulp should have looked like. Like, it's just fantastic. So when I'm like, hey, Say, you're great. Can I give you money to do a cover for me? And she was like, sure, sounds great. And so, like, talking to Fuzz, like, hey, if I want to do my own covers, that fine? He's like, yeah, but can you show me some of their work? And I sent him that poster. He's like, yeah, you got it. They're good. So yeah, like, she was fantastic to work with. I kind of gave her, like, I wanted to have that kind of old pulp noir feel, like the pulp paperback books that you got. And I think she did great with, like, the 13 stories sticker and the all the thrillers on the bottom and that. And then she's got that mood. And it's kind of a different cover as well, right? Because usually the common practice these days is you get an iconic scene from one of the stories in the anthology and put it on the cover, right? And it's a great honor to be on the cover. And that, from what I've heard, that helps sell it too, right? They can be like, you like this cover? This is a story. It's this story in this book. And people are like, great, I want to read that. So it was a little bit of a risky, gutsy thing going, this is not a story on the front. Like, it is 3 characters that are in 3 separate stories. And I hope you guys know which ones. But
first, middle, and I want to say Kiri's, right?
That's right. But I still think, like, it sets the tone really well for what you're going to expect. And I think it's one of the best covers, like, in furry fiction. I'm just going to say that. I'm sorry if I'm biased. I really think it's beautiful, and I love it. I literally got it printed out on a giant poster, and it's framed in my living room now. So,
well, as it should be. I mean, shoot! I almost got my hands on the Distant Signals poster, and I was like, "Yes, I'll happily take that."
Right.
And then some silly Canadian decided he wanted it. I mean, he might have some, like, validity to have, like, a reason above me, but
Those slippery wolves, I tell you.
I know, right? But the coffee ones, they supply you with caffeine, so they're always great. I mean, you've seen me on caffeine. You know how that can get.
I have seen. Oh, man. Mog, was it a caffeine fest for you guys at RAR too? Are you guys prepping JD for the caffeine jitters he will experience?
There There actually wasn't all that much coffee at my RAR class, but I brought a lot of tea, and
Imagine more like a lot more otters and less mean night eyes.
I still like that Otter's like, oh no, I don't have my steeper. Orders one on Amazon to be delivered.
You know what? I'm not going to complain because that's still in my kitchen right now. So,
Otter, I miss you.
I mean, I do have a case of furry fuel set aside for things.
Right.
wait, one case of furry fuel for RAR? Holy crap,
That's like
man!
a day's worth, isn't it?
Well, they shut down production. It's like, right, we've shipped out all orders. We're shutting it down. It's like,
Well, I've already put you in all the hot
that's
seats, so
gonna
you
help.
shouldn't have to be nervous around Kyle like I was. So I already had you do the Stuck Mayo story live, so you're good.
Then we're going to throw Ryan in there. Yay.
He just acts scary online, except in the RAR chat. Then
I'm still scared of him.
he's fine. He's great. You have no reason to be scared of Ryan. So, Ocean, did you have any particularly interesting stories in your first slush pile that unfortunately didn't make it in?
Yeah. So I think I don't know. Part of one of my maybe regrets is if you guys have read the dystopian anthology Dissident Signals, there's a story in there called Gloves, and I absolutely love that story. And the author had originally submitted it to Inhuman Acts, and I wanted to put it in the book. And my other slush pile readers were like, it's a great story, and it's a fantastic story. I recommend everyone go read it. But they didn't feel it was noir. And I still think to this day I should have accepted it, because to me, like, I'm still like, this is totally noir to me, but people were having some issues with the denouement of the story in that. But I just love that story, and I'm like, I don't know. I asked some other advice from other people that I trusted, and they're like, it's a very good story, but they didn't feel it was noir. So, like, that story, I still think I probably should have put it in there, but I'm glad it found a home, and it definitely belongs in a dystopian anthology, like, hands down. So, like, James Steele did a great work on that. I don't know, have you guys read that story at all? Do you feel it would have fit, or do you feel it's noir?
I believe our current plan is after the next story, or the next novella, whatever our current thing is. I believe Distant Signals is next in our list, so that is on the docket.
Okay, so you haven't read it yet? Okay, I will not spoil it then.
yeah, I haven't read all of Dissident Signals.
I have, and I need to write up my review for it.
I've read 2 stories of it.
The first 2?
No, it's mine and Mog's.
Well, Mog's is in the first 2. Yeah, I guess when you read this, when you read Gloves, let me know. We'll have a chat, because I feel that story is very noir, and I kind of regret not taking it. There was also another story that I believe made it into the next Roar. That was a tight story that maybe it should have gone in as well. I don't know, but that's the problem when you've got some great stories in your slush pile and you've got to make cuts. Oh, Grey Flank. So with Grey Flank's story, he sent me almost a 20,000 word story. Maybe I'm over exaggerating. It was interesting, but it felt like it had been rushed. And so I actually ended up going, I like what you've got here, but at the point where you've got this to me right now is there's way too much editing for me and my team to handle. While we're working on the stories we have, I will let you rework it. Here's some suggestions we had. I think we had him cut a whole scene at the beginning, and just polish it as much as you can and resend it to me by the end of the month, and we'll reevaluate it. So he did, obviously, and I was happy with what he had done. So we helped him polish it further and put it in at the end.
Nice.
I hope people enjoy it. One of our slush pile readers, I believe, got a nightmare from it too.
Oh,
so that's always a good sign.
Are they currently a slush pile reader as well?
Well, they were one person that just helped out on this story alone, and this year they're helping me slush pile read.
With the anthology in and of itself, are you generally happy with where it ended up, or are there other opportunities you think where it could have potentially been better?
So this was my first anthology, so there's definitely some inexperience that I think shows. I'm not sure how well my editing works in years later compared to now, but overall, I'm still very happy with the results, right? Like, I'm still able to look back at these stories and go, yes, yes. I get excited about them, right? When I think about each of them. I was really happy with the framing device, because a lot of the anthologies these days are just like, here's a story, here's another story, here's another story. And I'm just like, that's fine. But I really wanted to dive deep and to get you into that feeling of that noir, even if it's just hokey, corny noir, because noir does get there, right? We still have our really, really cheesy lines that are just like, oh my gosh. Right. But I wanted to dive into that. And so I took a page from Yanis's book with like the trick or treats. If you've read his trick or treats, he's got two characters, one for trick, one for treat. And they create this framing device, and they kind of introduce the stories in that. And so I took a page from his book and created Stanley Ribbits, right? I don't know if the way I introduced him and ended the anthology with him was the best writing. Like, that could be improved, and I'm going to try maybe for the second one. But I still like that I had this character and just the overall feeling of it. I told Fuzz early on, I'm like, I want each story to be a case file, right? And he's got these files. And so it reads like he's like a detective, and he's got all these stories for you to read. And I think that worked out well. So, like, again, there's things that could always be done better. Learning to work with your authors is always a tricky experience that comes with time and working with people. But I think we took some risks with this anthology, and I think it paid off.
So, because I've had an insight into at least one story potentially in the second anthology, have you thought about how your bird piece is going to fit into Inhuman Acts 2?
Oh yeah. It's part of the framing device, right? So basically, the start is Stanley walking into that club, and he meets up with someone and gives them the case files.
Oh.
Have you figured out the rest now?
Oh yeah, no, I remember you mentioned that at event. So it's like, I was wondering if that's how you were going to stick with it and have yours as the anchor, which is totally fine and your total choice. So,
well, it's kind of hard to have stories if my story isn't at the end. If you understand why,
right? Oh yeah. I'm excited. I'm just excited to see your story again, because that was a fun story.
I'm stuck on edits with it right now. I think maybe I should just rewrite everything and see where it goes. Still trying to. I tried to incorporate what I can. I'm still sitting here going, how can I make the character more relatable, or people more interested in them?
I still can't get out of my mind just Otter going pun after pun after pun, Ryan just table flipping and walking out. Just, I'm done.
See, that's some of the fun of noir, right? Like if you ask Kiri on our last vacation there, I took a noir book literally called Noir by Christopher Moore, and the whole time I'm reading, I'm like nudging her, like, check out this line. Oh my, can you believe? Look at this line. Look at this.
That's because it's Christopher Moore. That's not legit noir. That's tongue-in-cheek noir. That's that's what I was talking about at the beginning of this.
No, like it is both noir and it's also like a parody of noir at the same time. And if you're interested, I highly recommend checking it out. It was a great story.
What was the Steve Martin movie where he did the parody of the noir?
Pink Panther?
Pink Panther wasn't Steve Martin, was it? Oh wait, the new one.
No, that was
yeah. I actually thought he did a good job in the new one, but
it wasn't bad. It's just the movie itself was kind of.
it's no classic Pink Panther, but I don't know. I took my mom to that because we were both Pink Panther fans, and we loved it. So didn't it have Beyonce in it too?
Honestly, that's one I only saw once, and it's been ages since I've seen that. Though, jokingly, tangent off of Pink Panther, I remember watching the very first Pink Panther with my partner, and he's like, "This is boring. Nothing's happening." I'm like, "Well, what do you want?" It's like, "I want stories with character." I'm like, "This movie's nothing but character. This is slice of life character work. This is all you're getting here."
Answering your previous question a little bit here about things that I would like to change a bit. One of the other things that I've noticed, and this is especially with the slush pile I've been working with IA2, is that the overabundance of male characters. And
I'm sorry.
And like you can only do so much with your slush pile, but it was pointed out, and I do kind of have to agree. It'd be nicer to have a few more non-male characters and female characters that aren't all femme fatales or evildoers. So like I think I don't think IA was terrible for that. I think we had a decent, good mix of both, but there's always room for more, right?
Of course.
Well, I would definitely have to talk Fixer up for that one because
Mhm.
that was
Exactly,
excellent.
right?
Fixer and Curious Story is the other one that jumps to my mind. Darn it, table of contents actually turned.
Scorn?
Scorned was Curry.
Yes, Scorn.
Mary's Story also had a prominent female character in it as well. Muskrat Blues, that one was classic noir. Fix It was great because it was again not a detective story.
Right, yeah.
And I like that one.
Fixer was probably my favorite story character-wise.
Nice. Yeah, okay. How about this? You guys tell me what were your favorite stories, and if you want to start with Fixer, go ahead.
Vermin's Vice was my favorite story personally. It was by Vermin's Vice in this anthology, I caught on to JD's scale, and that question of, well, not scale, but this story belongs in the anthology if it makes you pause and go, that's messed up. So to me, that was one of the tells of noir, and by that point, I was looking for it. I knew what I was looking for, at least in concepts. I had the setting, but the character messed upness. That's what I was looking for. Is it going to come from this bigger rat or this smaller mouse? Who's it going to be? Where's it going to come from? And I'm going to stop there because spoilers.
Another question. Were you guys off-put by the pacing in the different scenes? How it goes one character to another?
In Vermin's Vice specifically?
Yes.
Okay, before I just ramble on, do you two want to chime in on that one?
Not really.
Yeah, I wouldn't say so.
That's good. That's good because that was one of the main concerns that like Slush Pile readers is like you've got two narrators. It's very confusing. So we made especially sure to be like it goes back and forth, and I think they each get 3 scenes each.
That sounds about
and then
right.
That's it. But
Yeah, it is. I'm just thumbing through it right now. That's about right. Yeah.
It was a little off-putting because I'm not used to multiple POVs like that with so little space.
yeah, it's very untraditional.
It was it was jarring at first, but once you got it was because I worry about that because I recently wrote a flash erotica.
Getting published, yay!
Yay!
But it flashes back and forth, and but people said I did it well, so I guess it's something you can do well. But no, Vermin's Vice did it well. I did, yeah. I wouldn't say it put me off to the story in any way, shape, or form. It's just after I realized what was going on, it didn't click initially, but like the second paragraph in after the POV shift, I had it, so it wasn't bad.
Mm-hmm.
I will say there is a little of my local writing group is basically been drilling into me. If you're going to do multiple POVs, give enough time for your POV character, and they're also usually talking in the form of a novel. So
right,
for me, these were a bunch of small scenes that were jumping heads. So it almost kind of felt head hoppy, but it was solidified in one character long enough to where it wasn't a head hop. I think it took a little getting used to, but the payoff was so worth it.
Yeah, you want to make sure as soon as that next scene hits, you kind of immediately cement whose POV it is right away. And you want to make sure that it is long enough that it's like there was a purpose for this scene, right?
Favorite story? Blacker Dog for me. I'm a folklorist, so that was the whole reason I bought the collection in the first place. And that was one I really enjoyed, just the weaving in of the folklore, and she did such a different take on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really liked her bringing in the concept of a black dog and the hellhound and just playing around with that. And then turning it on its goofy side to have a goofy noir detective black dog.
with the beef jerky hanging out of his mouth, like a lit cigarette, just gnawing on jerky. Well, for me, it's really hard for me to pin down because there are so many stories in this anthology that were good. If I had to pick an absolute favorite, I would have to say it's probably Muskrat Blues, just because it set the tone so well. But I mean, like a close second would be Fixer and A Blacker Dog and Guardian Angels. I mean, there's just so many good stories. I can't pin down. I honestly cannot pin down a favorite. I liked the vast majority of everything in your anthology.
I think that's one of the things that I've noticed, or at least from feedback I've heard, is that just about everyone I've talked to, they've all mentioned, like, I like this story and this story and this story, and every story has been mentioned in someone's favorite somewhere, which is great. Which means that, like, I don't have a story in there that's completely forgettable, because I know at least one person out there that went, that story was great.
So what are some aspects that you're particularly proud of or happy with in terms of the stories?
So let's just go through the stories. That's the easiest for me. So I think I've gushed enough over Muskrat Blues, but Yanis's story hits some really strong beats for me. One, it's what I love to see in anthrofiction, is that you have characters and species that matter. And I know people rag on me that species don't always have to matter, and they don't. But I like to be reminded why I'm reading anthrofiction. I like to have, like, oh, it's a pig. He smells good. He's got his trotter. Like, and then with the twist of what's going on is species related as well, which is great. And just that jaw-dropping twist, like I mentioned before, is just, this is noir. Set yourself up. You got 12 more stories to read. And then that leads into Fixer, which is definitely not I don't think it's one of the darker stories in the anthology, but it's definitely great because we're not following a PI anymore. We've got someone who's actually kind of a bit more on the criminal side, right? You've got this Fixer. They clean up crime scenes for the bad guys generally, and they just want that one last job. And it's almost that kind of hokey, I was about to retire. But I love it that, again, it's got a lead female character, and there's just that, I don't want to spoil too much, but there's the twist, and there's some betrayal in there. And it's just that sad longing that your character has been changed by the end of the story, right? And this is what I tried to stress in my intro, in the foreword, is that, yes, noir incorporates a lot of goofy jokes. It has a lot of shootouts and gumshoes making wisecracks. Like this, people can point at and go, that's noir. But what I really want when I'm looking for noir is that. I like seeing that, but what I really want are characters, and I want to see how those characters reflect how they change. I want to see them at their worst. I want to see them just fighting against what they can, even though it's a lose-lose situation. Like that to me is the best noir. And there's a lot of stories in my slush piles, both where it's just like, here's a noir, I'm monologuing and I'm smoking and it's a gritty world, and you're like, yep, I feel like I'm in a noir. And then it's just a bunch of action scenes. And I'm like, well, that's cool. I like it's good. But at the same time, it's not at the core of what I'm looking for, right? And so in this, I'm hoping that I have very strong characters in all my stories that are really showing the depths of their humanity or species of whatever they actually are, right? Like when we go into Danger with Lumo Bay, it's a little more, Mary's playing around with your classic noir feel. But by the end of it, I'm hoping that you feel the characters, at least, even though they were in a safe simulation that suddenly wasn't safe, even when they think they're safe, they end up not as safe as they think they are, right? They realize that even where they're in a simulation, like something where you should be able to do, I can do terrible things for fun. And I think one of you guys were mentioning, like, the captain in there is just like, he should be a good guy, but he's kind of doing douchey things. It's like he's like, I'm in a simulation, I can do what I want. And then by the end, he's kind of like, you know what? Even if it's a simulation, maybe I need to still watch what I'm doing, right? River City Nights, I really liked how Tana took just kind of your average Joe. And I don't know if you guys really, really cared much about my little intros that I wrote out before each story. But to me, like, I love them. And I really like Tana's, like, it's just an ordinary nobody lost in the hustle bustle of the city, doing the thankless job. But everybody wants to be somebody, right? And so you've got this cabbie that's trying, just like, he's a nobody. He's just a boring cabbie. Nobody cares. And suddenly he's thrown into this situation where maybe he can make a difference. Maybe he can do something different. Maybe he can do something for the greater good. Is it worth it? And just the path that he follows on there, and him reflecting on it at the end.
That was a great story for that alone, in my opinion.
Right, and this is where I, like, again, when I look back at these stories, I get really happy about how each of them has their own aspect and different aspects of noir that shine in each of them. Each story feels very unique to me compared to the next.
What aspects in Slip's story stood out to you so much?
So, like, Slips, what I love is how you have a villain that just does something so horrifying that it's almost unbelievable, right? And alongside, it's being mirrored along this detective that's going through their own terrible problems, but even his seem nothing compared to this truly horrifying madman that's creating monstrosities. Like, and when you find out the twist in that one, and you're just kind of like, whoa, it's almost Bond villain-esque in the sense, right? Yeah, like Slips definitely has some of the more horrifying aspect of noir, right? A lot of people say that mystery is just a subgenre of horror. I don't know if I agree with that, but I think this is one of those cases where it really blends the two in. Ghost. Again, I don't know why I, for some reason, forget this story, because honestly, it is one of my more favorites. And maybe just because it's so short. But I like Ghost. It actually has some of that cyberpunk that I keep asking for. And is, again, a really lovely story of... It really shows a character stuck at a crossroads and maybe not making the decision that the most normal moral people would make. Perhaps that's a less spoiler way of saying it, right? I really feel the sadness at the end of this piece, and it's just kind of soul crushing. Like, I just want to read this one again. It's been so long. But yeah, it's like, I loved you. I'm sorry, you were a detective. You knew much and you hid much. We need that. Like, you're choosing between your love and your job, and it's just, why? Did you? And most people will be like, no, you choose your love, and they're like, not my job. As they slowly, put the pillow over their loved one. Anyways, I like, again, it's just a I don't want to say sweet, because it's a beautiful short story, I think. Then we've got Huskyteers, which, I think you guys have gushed over too. She really plays around. It's a bit of that supernatural noir, right? Again, I like trying to get other genres in there. And so when you've got the black dog, your hellhound that you see right before you die, but it sets up this premise of, well, I already see him, which means I could die at any moment now, and just adds that tension throughout the story, right? Which is beautifully cut by having the whole premise of your demise being a goofy, trench coat wearing dog. Another story that after you've read it, you just kind of want to close the book and stop reading for a while.
I want to throw the author and say, "Give me more."
You want to read the sequel to that?
No, I want to read that story as a novel.
Oh yeah. We actually talked with Huskyteer about that. We asked if she had any plans to expand the story. The answer was a little ambiguous, but she said that she wouldn't mind doing it.
Oh, that would be cool. I'd read that.
Yeah, for sure.
Of course, I'll read just about anything Huskyteer makes, because she's fantastic. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Let's see. We got Crimson on Copper, which Tony really helped merge that. Like I said, that gritty, oily. Already, you've got a setting that already just kind of is gray, right? Literally, and then I think his is probably the best example of a character who just goes, the end justifies the means, because they won't stop. Nothing will stop them. They don't care what is in their way, and they're going to accomplish it, because in the end, everything will be worth it, regardless of whatever I did.
I also do think that story is probably one of the more mature ones, based off the graphic nature of it in general.
Yeah. The Crimson is for blood. Yes. If you didn't know,
lots and lots.
And there's quite a lot of blood in this story.
The descriptions they use are very, very well done.
We got Vermin's Vice, which I think is kind of a personal favorite of mine. Like I said, I had to fight for this one a bit to get it in there, but I'm extremely happy it's in there. And I believe I mentioned this before, but it's just that story of a good guy just trying to do the right thing and just getting pulled down further and further and further until he breaks until society finally snaps him, right? I don't want to say more. I feel like each of these is like a mini spoiler.
So we spoiler tagged this episode, and we're like, good.
Yeah, I guess. Scorned is great. Scorned is another one that and it's funny because Kiri's like, I don't know what I did, but I got it. And all of us were like, yeah, this is a good little noir story. It just kind of hits all the good beats. I'm sure she's got a story or two to tell you about how I'm just like, do you want me to rewrite your entire story? And she's like, yes, please do. Because originally I'm like, no, I need your detective to be a detective.
Oh no! Oh god!
But like it's another one that's a bit it's your I feel it's more of your like classic detective noir, right? It's telling the story. It's got your betrayal, your femme fatales. It's got twists and some turns, and this character that just almost their biggest enemy is themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And apparently she's written a sequel for the next book, so I'm excited to read that.
Really? Ooh.
Yes. She thinks she knows what noir is now. And I'm not saying that as a joke. That's what she said. Also, I'm glad. I love the font that we found for the case file and the story titles. Again, like I tried to pour as much as I could into just getting the feel into the book just by looks in that, and I think it paid off on that.
You mean as close as career new as you can get?
Yeah. Well, this one. I believe this font is specifically called Betty Noir.
Oh my god!
I have to double check on that. Let me double check. I could be wrong.
Hold on. I don't care. You're gonna get typing because I'm just. Hold on one sec. Mog, you're gonna have to act goal in a second.
Okay.
No, it's not Betty Noir. I'm sorry. The cover, the title on the cover is Betty Noir. The ones for the story titles themselves is something different, but it was something like psychiatric horror hospital font or something. I can't remember. Fuzz and I were looking over some fonts, and I found this one. He's like, yeah, it looks perfect. And I think, again, it really sticks through. But yeah, the title of the anthology is in Betty Noir. So if Chip is listening, I'm sure he'll enjoy talking about the fonts.
So it's up. Feel free to add her.
At who?
Go Wolf.
What did you do for Go? Oh, Betty. Oh, of course. I believe this font is Betty Noir. Here, I'll even link it. The font of Gull's next novel. There we go. And replied, just for you guys. She did send me a noir story. Maybe we could just publish it. And can we just, for that story specifically, we will. Looks like we have a notification. Oh, TJ liked it. Yeah, her story alone will be in just one font, different from everyone else. It's Betty Noir. Bullet Tooth Claw. This one I liked because you've got this is a bit more of one of the lighter stories in my mind. Just because you've got, and I should point out to a lot of people, this introduced many people in the furry fandom to the Uplift, which is something a lot of us should know more about. But you've got the Bloodhound, your classic like detective dog as the detective, which I really like that, just that spin. And then he also, of course, uses his nose as a great tool throughout the story. And now I'm just buzzing. Okay, now Mog is liking my reply. Oh. It doesn't make my phone buzz.
Just have it on mute. You're good.
I don't know if Otter's read this, though, because Otters.
Wait, I don't remember. Is he a sea otter or a river otter? Because then he might care.
Oh, I forget. I think he asked that and we found out. But yeah, like I like the twist of instead of just the man's best friend twist in there with the whole story and how he's this PI in an uplifted world. It was definitely a change of pace that I was really welcomed in the anthology. And speaking of change of pace, we have Guardian Angel, which is probably what I feel is probably the most changing of pace of any of the stories in here.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Which I think is probably one of the more, I want to say, polarizing stories. I think people either really like it or kind of mad on it, from what I've heard. And that's not to say it's a bad story. It just appeals to certain people. I don't know what you guys thought about it.
Honestly, I didn't think the noir came in until like literally the last scene and a half.
It's like, what's going on? Oh, that's what's going on. See, it's one of those. It's a good example of the noir story where you're fighting against all the odds, knowing you're not going to win, but you're still going to take whatever you can get. Which is another noir trope I like, right? And I think I've said this many times, but I forget what it's called. I want to call it the gambler story in the second Sin City movie. So in that one, it's what's his name? Gordon Levitt.
Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Yeah. So in that one, it's got Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Is that?
Yep.
Okay. It's got Gordon Joseph Levitt as this gambling kid who's just fantastic at gambling. He can win at slots, which is not something you can do. But he wins his way up to this primo poker game where I think the governor or the mayor or some big shot that runs the city. And this big shot is one of the ones where it's like, no, you always lose to him, because if you don't, you don't win, quote unquote, right? But he's like, no, I'm going to win. And so he wins. And of course, because he does, he gets beat the crap out and tossed to the street to learn his lesson. And what does he do instead? He just gets off his feet, goes right back, still goes, I got $1 left, wins all his money back so he can go right back up to the poker table. To do the exact same thing again. And then in the end, the guy's like, yeah, and then spoilers, the governor dude, whatever's like, fine, whatever, and just shoots him in the head. Like, kid don't care. Kid did what he could. Kid got up there, he fought the odds, and he's just like, doesn't matter now. I'll always be the guy that beat you twice. So in Guardian Angels, you're giving this unwinnable situation, and in the end, they're just doing whatever they can to scrape off whatever win they can, right? Because there is no winning in this, but maybe, just maybe, we can push through something, some light of hope.
And last but not least,
and then we got Brooklyn Blackie, which I need to get Gray Flank's. Is it a novella or a novel or a collection of short stories? Either way, I need to read his noir thing, because I believe Brooklyn Blackie is prominently figured in that one. But I really enjoyed his storytelling in this one. He's definitely got that great twist at the end where you're just like, oh god, that's what they're doing. That again, I think ends the anthology on a good note where you're just like, just remember, before you leave too soon, don't forget, horrible shit still happens. People can do terrible things. But I also just love Brooklyn Blackie's character and the way he goes about his moral grayness is so gray that you couldn't say it's black or white either way. He's definitely not a penguin. I just like his character so much and the way he goes about things. His moral compass is really his guide, right? He's like, I think that's wrong. I think that's right. And that's the way I'm going to go. And if you don't like it, tough shit to you.
Based on your experiences with Inhuman Acts, what are some things you were hoping to see in the IA2 slush pile?
Oh man, I could rant about the things I see in slush piles, but that's another story. I think what I've seen so far is a lot of people heard that it's like maybe he doesn't want as many detective stories, and I have not gotten as many, which is great. And definitely, there's been a lot of people who have been pushing into other genres and seeing what they can do. Let me tangent for a second here, as if tangent is a word or a verb. But when I was at AC and we were doing a book signing, one guy came up and was like, "Oh, a noir book," and I'm like, "Yes." And he was like, he was like, "What I love about noir is when you get these stories that are just so twisted and so demented. When you get to the twist, and all you can do is your jaw drops and you go, "That's fucked up." And I was like, you share the same thing I do with a noir. Please, sir, buy this book because I think you will enjoy it. Because it's just like that is what I want to see the most. And I know you can't have that in every story, right? But those are the ones that get me the most. And what I look for the most is I want something where I get to the twist and then it's just like, whoa, head explode. And it's hard to do that because I think I'm just maybe a jerk and just like I'm very picky. So I'll be like, okay, I guess that was a twist. But I'll keep pointing back to Yanis's. I think that the twist in that is chef's kiss, just mwah. I love stuff like that. Like not Brooklyn Bucky. Black Sad really had some comics in there where I was just blown away by holy crap. Or if you watch like Kevin Spacey in The Usual Suspects, when you get to the end of the movie and the twist there, like that's the literal the trope of the mug dropping and shattering for good reasons. Like there's reasons that is now like a corny gag that people do is because that's how a twist should make you feel. I feel is that you should be just like, holy crap, and you drop the mug and it shatters because that's what your mind is right now. Your mind is blown. Those are the noir stories that I, of course, love because that's just stories that I love. It doesn't have to be noir, but I love a really good twist like that. But those are hard to write. So I don't blame anyone who doesn't write them or do them because it's really hard to do right. Otherwise, yeah, I would love to see more lady characters in not just my IA slush pile, but all my slush piles. Sorry, guys, me included. There's too many of us. There are ladies in this world, and they tell interesting stories too. And I want to hear more about them and non-binary characters and transgender characters. And I think we as authors just need to write more non-male characters is what my slush files have been showing me lately. But that's not related to IA. That's just something that I'm just like, I need to do this more. Yeah, otherwise I always love a good story. Send me a good story and I'm happy to read it. This is just going to turn into my next Fangs and Fonts podcast where I complain about things in the slush pile. It's like, why does your story start on page 10 and end on page 12? Like, those things are things that annoy me. I think my greatest fear now is that Inhuman Acts, like, I feel it was really great, that I'm not going to be able to follow it up with something better. I should have stopped while I was ahead.
So, Mr. Tigrox, after going over all of this, if people are interested in finding you, where can they do so?
Sure. If you guys want to hear what I'm up to, you can follow me at Twitter at Tigrox Tales for my writing, or if my random day-to-day ramblings at Ocean Tigrox. Tune into Fangs and Fonts to hear whatever we're talking about in furry literature. And check out IA2 whenever it comes out. I have no idea when it's coming out, sorry. When it's done. Maybe MFF if we're lucky.
Yes, thank you so much for coming on. It was a pleasure having you.
Oh, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.
Always happy to ramble on about stories with my fellow authors.
We hope you enjoyed UFR's interview of Ocean Tigrox. Coming up next is an interview with the awesome Huskyteer. We'll be talking about her story, A Blacker Dog in Inhuman Acts. It's really quite good. So stick around and we hope you enjoy.
We have the pleasure of having the wonderful Miss Huskyteer all the way from across the pond here at Furthermore 2019 with us here today.
Good evening, or time of day as appropriate.
So, we are here specifically to talk about and discuss A Blacker Dog. It was a story that Miss Huskyteer wrote for the anthology itself. It is one of the stories, specifically story number 7, specifically 007, which is so appropriate for the wonderful guest of honor here.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I believe there's a little story behind that. Would you like to share that with the audience?
Sure. We've been talking on some of the panels this weekend about how to edit and plan an anthology and where you put each story to provide rising and falling action in your collection and not have too many similar stories together. But sometimes, like Ocean did, you give me the 7th slot, so it's story 007, because he knew I liked my Bond.
Who's your favourite Bond?
Timothy Dalton.
Favorite Dalton film?
Living Daylights.
Very nice.
Yeah.
I definitely have to check that one out because that's one I don't actually think I've seen, unfortunately.
Oh, I think you would like it.
Fantastic. I will have to look at that. This anthology was published a number of years ago, and I'm trying to find, there we are, back in 2015. So it has, I acknowledge it's been a while for you since the story was written. Do you want to go ahead and give us a high-level overview of the story, just for our audience?
Sure. It's based on the Black Dog legend, which is a British legend that if you see a large black spectral dog and nobody else can see it, it means you will shortly die. So in this universe, everyone has a black dog. It accompanies them all their life, and it's with them at the moment of their death. But the protagonist of A Blacker Dog is the only person he knows of who can see these dogs. And so he has quite a friendly relationship with his own black dog, who's named Hunter. But he knows that this dog has the power to take him out of his life at the end of it. So he's having to deal with that his best friend may also be the thing that kills him.
Something that I really picked up and enjoyed, Hunter's not a typical four-legged furry critter, spectral or otherwise.
No, Hunter, your black dog might be any sort of dog that happens to come in black. So you could be a poodle, cocker spaniel, a mutt. Hunter is a black Labrador, and instead of trotting around on all fours as most dogs do, he has chosen to manifest as a dog who walks on two legs and wears a trench coat and fedora.
Yes,
Mostly because I liked that.
Yes, I believe actually Ocean has said that if you have seen the cover of Inhuman Acts, that's Hunter on the front.
I was very excited when I saw that. Is that my character? Yes, it is. Yay!
Reading through the collection, as I've been putting, like, this is from this story, this is from this, that's Hunter.
Yep.
Yes, yes, yes. Especially from looks, I think Hunter is certainly one of the most noirish, visually, characters in the collection, so it was fantastic.
Well, I love the noir look. I especially love Humphrey Bogart movies.
Oh, yes.
So that, the trench coat and the low-brimmed hat, I'm a sucker for that. I wanted that in my noir story.
You mentioned Bogart, it makes me kind of laugh. One of the reasons I chose this anthology for our first review is because the second volume is currently in slush.
Oh, yes.
So I had an idea, I already knew I wanted this story for the noir anthology too. But how the heck do I write noir? I had no idea, so I actually wanted to read this. Unfortunately, before I wrote my story, I was not able to get through it. I got through the first story, and I happened to watch The Maltese Falcon because that is one of the most noir stories I think I've heard of.
Yes.
Which stars Humphrey Bogart. What was even funnier afterwards is trying to go through TV tropes, trying to pick up all the tropes, but TV tropes is so tongue-in-cheek with itself.
Right.
Well, it's giving you the information. It's still all like, you still gotta know what we're talking about. Butt faces.
But I think Maltese Falcon is the originator of a lot of the noir tropes.
Yes.
And berries.
Yes.
Yeah, very true. I noticed that Hunter likes pepper jerky.
That was because it didn't make sense for him to smoke.
I love it.
Oh, that is fantastic.
He's got to have something in his mouth that he speaks around the way Bogey does that particular thing with a cigarette.
Right. That is
so
amazing.
it's beef jerky sticks.
So we may want to shuffle this around, but if I may be that guy, I'll admit, when I read this story, I had so much fun with it. It's not that I want to see more with these characters, which I do, but I don't. If anything, I actually want to see. I would love to see this story as a novel. It was, as it was, I thought there was so much there that could have gone into a little bit before to establish the relationship, and during to explain what was actually going on with the thing. I'm trying not to spoil for.
I would love to expand it. I think it's a nice universe. I'm very pleased with it. I don't know whether I would expand the story, which is tempting because I like it, I like the characters, but then it's already out there in this version, or if I would try to write something else in this universe. But yeah, I'd like to go back there.
If I may ask for myself, have you thought, at the time or since, have you thought about where... Let's go simple yes, no for this, because spoilers. Have you thought about where your characters are now? Big air quotes there. Or is this one of those stories where you knew where it was going, the story ended, but you kind of were left with the audience as well, not sure where it goes?
Yeah, I'm not sure what happens next.
That makes me so sad. How very noir of you.
I know. Yeah, I spoke on a panel earlier about I had to pick an ending for this story, and I picked the right one, which isn't always the likeable one.
I would agree wholeheartedly with that statement.
Mm-hmm.
So I know when I was doing my review of this story, the two categories that this story really stuck out to me are both in character, just especially the interaction between John and Hunter. The relationship they had is just so earnest and true, especially in that sense that I went from caretaker to partner, and just that the way that they have that relationship is just fantastic. It's something I know I really enjoyed. What inspired you for that sort of relationship?
Well, I don't know if you're aware of a TV show called Randall and Hopkirk Deceased, which in the US ran as My Partner the Ghost.
Heard of it, have not seen it.
Well, it's an early 70s British TV show. It's quite tongue-in-cheek, and the premise is it's a pair of private investigators. In the first episode, one of them gets killed. He's actually been murdered, and his ghost comes back to help his partner solve the case. But he lingers too long, and so he's left unable to go wherever departed spirits go next. So he's now an invisible partner that only Jeff Randall can see and hear. So it was very much based on that relationship. In fact, in the first draft, Hunter's name was Marty, who was the ghost in the TV show. And they have that kind of bickering, bantering relationship with still a lot of trust and friendship behind it. And the bonus of Jeff looking like he's completely mad whenever he talks to Marty and somebody else sees them.
Yeah, I did notice that in some of the interactions they were having, where I really liked how you incorporated that in. The characters would kind of look at him funny and say, what are you doing? What are you talking about? Or did you say something? When he was talking to his partner, the black dog. So,
and that is, and there's a history of that kind of. Harvey and Drop Dead Fred, which is a great favourite of mine, which is Rick Mayall as the childhood imaginary friend who comes back to his child when she's an adult woman and is having a tough time. So yeah, I guess Invisible Friend is a trope I like.
As a note, for the listeners out there, if you've not seen Drop Dead Fred, it's highly recommend. Good, funny movie.
As a secondary note, not just the listeners have not seen Drop Dead Fred.
But if you want a film where somebody calling their friend Snotface comes across as incredibly sweet and moving, that is that film.
Oh, you're not wrong.
The other point that I had something marked down for a Blacker Dog was specifically in the descriptions, especially in Hunter's eyes and the first time they're seen, and that dialogue that Hunter and John have back and forth. That whole scene right there to me was just absolutely fantastic. Where did you come up with that idea of looking into the depths of hell but not actually being pulled there? Just rolling with the folklore tale?
I think it's as simple as red eyes are scary. And in childhood, I think it was Short Circuit that did that for me. Johnny Five and the robots who haven't come to life are the same model, but number 5 has a nice, gentle expression. And because the war robots fresh from the factory have red light in their heads instead, they're terrifying.
And this other one's more just a compliment. That final fight was fantastic. I was told, I'm trying so hard not to go into spoilers.
There's a final fight.
That was one hell of a stare down.
I end up writing a lot of fight scenes, and I find them quite hard to do. I'm better at dialogue than action, so I'm glad that one worked.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't have guessed.
This is, I believe, the second story I've read from you that had a heavy folklore influence. Is that something that you seek inspiration in a lot?
Oh, are you thinking of Jenny Burnttail in Trick or Treat?
400 Rabbits?
Oh,
that's 3 then.
wow,
Yeah.
yes. That's not something I realised. A Blacker Dog actually came about because I believe it was Apex magazine, an online sci-fi and fantasy magazine, was running a flash fiction competition, and your flash fiction had to involve one of, I think, a selection of 4 or 5 beasts from folklore that they had picked, and I picked on black dogs and researched them, and the flash didn't place at all, but I ended up getting about 8,000 words out of it. 400 Rabbits I drew on folklore because it was specifically an anthology about gods and myths.
It was Gods with Fur, which is one of the other awards for that, wasn't it?
I did. Yeah, I was pleased with that because that was quite a humorous story, and I like writing humour. It is quite difficult, and it often doesn't get as much recognition as more serious tales.
Believe me, you don't want it to get recognition. You quickly become a meme if it gets recognition.
There's recognition and there's notoriety.
Well, they say if you can't be famous, at least be infamous.
And so you did.
Yeah, one thing I noticed with Inhuman Acts is that nobody tended to stay close to that Humphrey Bogart trope of the private eye, but I think the supernatural elements from yours are one of the more stand out variations on that story. Is that something you started with as a beginning, or did you start with I want to write a PI first?
It did start with I want to write a PI, but everyone will do that. How can it be slightly different but still have those noir overtones? It's set in London because if I try to write something set in the US, I'm going to get things wrong. Really.
See, that just makes me kind of chuckle because I'm the weirdo that everywhere. Because my default is the US because of where I am and grew up and all that other fun stuff. Unless I hear otherwise, and even when I hear otherwise, I'm still like, okay, I still hear the American accents, which also makes me kind of feel weird saying, but it's just that, and it's which I have a feeling is also very same for you, that your default is not, it's what you're used to.
Yes, it is generally in the UK, and I often don't specify a setting, but if you imagine it is a suburban area just outside London, you'll probably be correct most of the time.
Yeah, I completely understand that. My stories default to small Midwestern towns, so.
Do they always have PH days?
Alright, first, Professor Mogg does not have a southern accent.
He does now!
It's Fanon now.
For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, you never will. That's for us.
So another thing that you and I talked about was putting stuff that's going on in your life into your story. So we have both written stories about people with lousy jobs.
For the record, for those not on the video podcast, Huskyteer talking to me at the time, well, directing towards me anyways. I've written stories set in the call center, which is a lovely, lovely place to work. Sarcasm is spilling all over the place right now.
So I've done a lot of temping, and I've written quite a few stories about characters who are unhappy with their jobs because they're a bit boring. This is also a story about how estate agents are evil, evil people.
Yeah, no, I totally got that.
Because you read the story?
The ending bad guy, how he can't get in his words, but the antagonist, how he ends up corrupting this element that's supposed to just be, for want of a better term, a much more pure element.
I creeped myself out a bit rereading that,
Yeah.
actually.
Oh yeah, that
I'm
was.
not looking forward to going to sleep tonight.
With Mog's statement, it actually kind of makes me curious. With the core of the big bad evil guy that you came up with, and the idea of, no, this is just a dog. I'm training my dog to fight. Is that just you went with that? How did you come up with that idea, especially with the supernatural twist? Is just like, it's a dog. What dog can't be trained, and come up with that character?
I'm honestly not sure. I know I wanted the idea of this spirit who is much more strange and frightening than the quite comical supernatural element we've got used to. Yeah, I think that just grew organically with the story. It was where the story needed to go.
It's a good story.
Very good story.
Thank you.
Easily one of my top 3 stories, and just fantastic and so enjoyable. Hence why, please write this as a novel or novella. I would, if I had money, I would totally commission that idea because, yes, please. But I don't have money, unfortunately.
That is really nice feedback. Because sometimes, as an author, you can't tell what's a really smart idea and what's an idea that you personally are in love with, and it's maybe a darling that should be killed.
Do you have any idea how much it costs to commission a novel?
To commission a novel depends on whose rates we're talking. If I'm talking to someone who doesn't know what they're talking about, I might be able to squeeze by with a better deal than not. But because she's been published, she knows what fandom rates are. So
If it's me, you can probably bribe me with gin, to be honest.
oh! How many bottles are we talking here?
Can we say crates?
Crap! There goes my budget.
Yeah, as for me, this was the story that drew me to this anthology originally, and I have to say it is probably my favorite in the collection. Shall we end on the important question? Did Hunter score with the poodle?
Oh, he didn't have much chance, poor thing.
Oh.
But, knowing that supernatural black dogs have these urges is a story potential in itself.
Oh, that is a good point. I mean, the way you humanized something that was so supernatural, I mean, literally humanized something that was so supernatural, to the point where he's walking upright and he's wearing a trench coat and smoking beef jerky sticks. It was really, the imagery was absolutely great. I loved that aspect of the story. So, but everything I've read of yours, characters are just amazing.
I like writing character.
Yes.
My problem is finding enough story to build around them.
We did pretty good with this one.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So if I may rallying you on the spot based off something he said, so what happens if a child is born between 2 black dogs?
Wow.
There you go.
There's the starting point of my novel right there.
Hooray!
The man without a black dog.
All right, Husky, is there anything that you would like to mention about the story?
Well, one thing I forgot when I was talking about what influenced the story was Philip Pullman, his Dark Materials, and everyone in that world having a demon.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so impressed by how much he makes you care about the idea of having this creature that arrives when you're born and sticks by your side all the time. It's not something that we have in this world, but we become so invested in it and so fond of these demons. So I wanted to echo that a bit.
Okay, this has been Up for Review's interview with Huskyteer. And it's been a pleasure to have you. It's actually been quite good to have you here. It's been a very quaint experience for the lot of us.
Quite in the American sense, I think.
Actually, when you said quite earlier, and my mind is like, is that the American version or the European version? So for those, real quick, because we're not doing furry podcast without context, in the US we all know that quaint is simple, is cute, is adorable. In UK, quaint is... oh.
As in, how quaint an outside toilet.
And quite good. Well, for us, that was quite a good job. You did a great job. Yay, go you! It's just another way to say it. While in the UK...
Quite means it was okay. So I had years of people saying to me, I thought your story was quite good. And of me thinking, oh, okay.
In all honesty, this was fantastic. Thank you for letting us run you through our ringer, if you will, and slamming about not knowing what we're doing.
Thank you for having me on. Talk to you again, I hope.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Were there any closing remarks you had for us? Where can people find you if they're interested in reading more of your works?
Oh, huskyteer.co.uk and also at huskyteer on Twitter.
Fantastic. Thank you once again so much for being with us here again, and this has been
Up.
our
Review.
Yay.
Night, everybody.
Night.
Bye.